Ladies and gentlemen, that has to go in my top time, like top 10, top 1, top 0 most banging intros of all time. We're going to be going over Azure theory and parting. And I started off the tweet by saying it's Azure fire good time watching theory craft games, but parting is such sweet sorrow. And if you've seen what parting has been doing to these people, it's kind of disgusting. It just looks so. It feels like I'm just watching like Kingdom Hearts 1 trailers again. He's just like full, simple, and clean, like basic Keyblade up on these people, just hitting them with the raw. But that's not what you came here for. Or maybe it is. Maybe you did come here for some like, and if you came here for that, like, we're gonna have to get a different channel. I'm gonna have to go to the gym. We're gonna have to get some 14-ounce gloves. I'm gonna have to get in shape. Like, there's a lot of stuff that we have to do. Instead, I can sip this monster. We can give a special shout out and a thank you over here to Artosis yet again, letting us use this content. It is muted, and if you want a cast, this ain't it. If you want the full like raw replay, we're under NDA. We can't do that yet. But if you want to see me analyze some games and see how this fits into some of my wild theory crafts about what maps are good for whom and why, and what the attack paths will be, and what a strategy look like, and how does this meta shift happen, if it does at all, between Vanguard and Infernals, then you're in the right place. And we're also going to see some mirror matchups. So if you, like me, are grateful that we got the opportunity to go ahead and cast these using somebody else's content as a base, then you can go ahead and use the command that is up in there. It is bang Supercup or bang match 2, which is what we're going to be looking at right now. That'll take you to, I believe it's called Artosis Casts 2, which is the channel where you can watch Artosis with the observer. I believe it was Mapu, and you can go over the base game there. You can watch it uninterrupted for its full entertainment value. And if you want the entertainment value of me being right, wrong, and otherwise not indifferent, right, in my own quirky way that's different from what the skills that those two and many others are providing, then you can stay here. You can enjoy the stream. Or, hear me out, you could stay here. Then you could go over there. Double the Stormgate content. All right, so theory versus Azure, and I feel like Azure is going to have the theory of a dead man here, as it is kind of known in the community. It is kind of a meme that it just looks like we're either in a meta shift or a balanced patch, in which for this PTR, for this release, notice that this is actually, we've got a shout out over here. Notice that this build is probably a little bit different. I can't tell if this build precedes the Bisu build or is after it, but notice up in the upper left hand side, 0.39263 shipping tech PTR Mapu 2740. Anyways, couple of things. So this is Broken Hinterlands. When we did the map analysis, we talked about some things that you want to do on Broken Hinterlands. Again, this is a map that I think doesn't really favor Vanguard. Like, if you're both at a 10, this will push you to an 11 if you're Vanguard. But what it really does is it takes Infernals down to a 7, because they have a lot of attack paths, and they really want to take a fight that forces a lot of blood, guts, gore, and animus. And if they choose the wrong direction and you go the other direction, that might mean that you have the faster units that get the slip around them. And so Scout is going out over here. Good stuff. Good stuff, Azure. I think what we've learned is that, well, you get all the damage done that you can with the Scout, and obviously if you're way better than your opponent, you just kill imps here. But it's going to be a hard sell. These imps have, I believe they're 90 and 45. Is that right? No, they're 80-40. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're 80-40. And so they're on constantly regenerating health. We're going to call that Veil, because I refuse for the life of me to be calling this white health. It needs a term. We're going to call it Veil. The Scout really isn't looking to get too much crazy damage done on those imps. I mean, anything you can get is fine, but as long as you don't kill it, if you don't do health damage, you're not doing any real damage. And all the damage you take as the Scout is permanent. It also looks like in this build, what we saw in DreamHack Atlanta, where you would slow units when you attack them with the Scout, it looks like either their speed was nerfed and they lost that ability, or Fiends were buffed in comparison and Scouts lost that ability, which is probably why we're not seeing a whole lot of Scouts. What you really want to do with that Scout is you want to get a full look at what's the expansion timing, and then you want to take a look at When is the first imp going over for Therium? Attacking, especially with that building placement of the Iron Vault towards the Luminite that we saw TheoRy put down, you're going to be pretty resistant against all but the most aggressive and committed scouts, and the scout should be doing something other than that. Right? But I think that actually sending that scout to go get the Therium, like send the scout to go attack the work that's got the Therium, is really important. This is like reason one of a lot why the attack path is kind of interesting here. The natural to natural placement does encourage you to go through the low ground, but the low ground is flanked on two sides by high ground, makes this map good for proxies. And requires that you actually scout it with the brute. If you and if you're too slow, then you have to split and then make a bunch of weird decisions right quick. Both players going for one of their starting facilities, so one Iron Vault and then one barracks. And actually, we studied the scout did a good job of getting the information and will be here to help a little bit against this brute. But given the damage the brute does, the health that it has, I don't really think that the scout would get as much done here as it would for getting scouting information on the bottom side. Now, notice this says we're going to have a more committed two-base attack or a more committed two-base defense. Looks like the defense is going to happen here, and this implies that the back rocks, the light forest, is actually going to be taken over here by TheoRy. At least that's what makes sense. It doesn't make sense to make defenses and then advance yourself in front of those defenses, and we do see the imps are breaking down the rocks. Rather, the imp is breaking down the trees, as was suggested. It's going to lose its veil, but it doesn't really matter. This is another reason why you want to have Doggo around, the scout around. The scout's not actually doing a whole lot of good going back to base. Yeah, you picked up a couple of pickups, but you always had the ability to do that anyways. Anytime that you retreat, anytime that the opponent who is Infernals uses their brute to slowly, cantankerously lumber over and pick up value, then they're not getting value, and they can't risk that because what if you fast expanded? You have a scout regardless of whether or not you fast expanded, and they don't know that. So they have to get over the other side of the map, confirm what your unit count is, and then if you have the scout, and especially if it was harassing the imp that had the Therium, then you would be able to keep this around here. Again, it's that decision-making process that we talked about in the parting game, where if you keep your scout around, yes, they might split up the brute and kill the scout because the scout is slower than the fiends. But you need to think about this holistically. What did they get out of that? They lost all of the staying, damaging, like really scary overcharge forcing power of one of their brutes. And they got two fiends that have to stay on Veil or will die. So they're probably going to get sent to the other side of the map, and then those are much less threatening, and they themselves can't split up. And so I think keeping the scout around, even if you lose the scout, is pretty good. Anytime that you can force the opponent to fiend on their side of the map, you're celebrating. It's a good time. Biggest reason you want to do this, and yes, there is some assistance over here with the scout, but notice that is a tickle. That is yeah, they're 80-40. That's the tiniest of tickles. And we are going to see that the Lancer should be coming out here soon. Yep, the Brute is just trying to figure out what it can do and what it can see, and actually it's going to retreat as soon as it sees that this is not a fast expansion. I wouldn't recommend a fast expansion on this map anyways. I would actually say you could probably imply that this isn't a fast expansion by the fact that there is nothing at the second high ground, at the mid-level high ground, but maybe you want to check to see that there are proxies, and if that happens, then you do have like an emergency, oh shit, split moment, make some stuff, make some defense, but you would probably also not be too fussed about it, because we've got the wall already over there on the bottom left-hand side. I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's a wall over here on the bottom left-hand side towards where the YouTube play line is. That indicates that those are meat farms and probably a shroud stone that are being held up over here for TheoRy. For TheoRy? Sanity check? Yeah. Okay. Brute goes over here, and the reason it's going over here and is going for camps is that it forced the scout back defensively. We see this sometimes in Rax versus Beast for Little War Game. You will take your slow clunk, you would take your there the timing's a little bit different, but the same thing would happen. You would take 4 soldiers and an archer. You would push out across the map. Test to make sure that your opponent wasn't doing anything too greedy, and if they were making normal responses, you just washed your hands of it, treated it like Pontius Pilate, and said, yeah, I'll just go back and do something else. And also, you're pretty happy over here if you're TheoRy, because you know that you're getting the third base, and you know that it was basically unopposed. There is a fast Hedgehog coming out, and this actually is an interesting take here. Something that we see in we see in other RTSs is that, they've got a fast unit. What do I do against the fast unit? Well, their fast unit's probably good against your slightly slower units, as we are going to see this should be a successful creepjacking attempt, actually. I'm sure he would love to get the brute and then force the split. There we go. Scout goes in. I wonder if actually the scout can poke the camp right here and then force this camp to attack those fiends. These fiends shouldn't be able to kill this level 1 camp anyways, and they're losing health over time. So I wonder if you could, like, is it team dependent? Interactions. That would be really cool for me to know. But that would be a way that you could use the creep, because if the creeps are stronger than your forces, part of the reason creepjacking works is that you can get in there and deal the final blow. But something else is that you can harass the army while they're creeping if it is a damaging enough creep. And in this case, where they should just be straightly overpowered, you can use the scout, go through the, like, in the light turret in the light forest through this light fill. You can attack the camp here. It's a level 1 camp, but these two fiends with rapidly decaying health shouldn't be able to take care of it because all of their veil is exhausted. And then you use your scout to attack them while they're losing health and getting attacked by this, and then you just kind of celebrate. It's like a really tiny micro thing, but these really tiny micro things are going to be the entities that we see expand and we get more of as the game expresses itself more to us. If not on this map, then elsewhere, and this is very important because this is stuff you just don't do in StarCraft. Now, you should actually know, like, something's a little bit up, and actually the timing of this Hedgehog, so first off, getting the Hedgehog and forcing the split is pretty good over here on the part of Azure, but TheoRy's going to be a bit happy knowing that, like, oh, okay, it's the Hedgehog plan. All right, I got it. And the reason that I was going on that point earlier about the micro vision camp level 1, the reason I was going on that point earlier about the, it's actually pretty smart to make a building in this case. Yeah, he actually, now he's, because you see what happened here is that the speed camp was able to get killed because these 4 were able to do it post-split, whereas 1 could not. So this is a trade of the speed camp for the vision camp, and speed is actually health. You can think of speed as health regen or health, a restriction or a removal of the delayed health on fiends, right? Because fiends lose health over time, so if they get a speed camp, they can get from point A to point B faster, and that means that they'll be at point B with more effective health than they had previously. And so the trade of vision camp for speed camp, like, seems pretty good, especially since with the attack path of the 3rd right here, you would have to go out and then over to the side and then continue on. So really this is just being picked up to make, because why not? It's value anyways. You had to split the unit anyways. You might as well get something. The reason you care about getting the fast 3rd base is that buildings often struggle to it's usually the case that fast harassment units are pretty bad at taking out buildings. In the Artosis example video, he shows that actually this is not like vultures. They're actually pretty good at taking out buildings, and they're pretty good at taking out large cumbersome lumbering targets. It shows an example of a Magmadon, and maybe it's a Weaver, but I'm pretty sure it's a Magmadon that it takes from like near full veil to just like six hedgehogs just go and chunk all of its veil and then get it to half health. But fiends are kind of the thing right now in this Supercup that we've seen thus far. Therefore, I think the Hedgehog is actually going to be a bit remiss if it tries to go up the side there. And there's not a natural. You may have noticed. Okay, so the Hedgehog is up, and we're going to see the Force move out alongside of it. Only question to ask is, and yeah, there's meat farms and a shroud stone, right? Now there's 2 hedgehogs, and the hedgehogs actually, here's the thing, this is, I understand both ways, right? You actually want to kill the unit because it contributes to veterancy, unless fiends don't contribute to veterancy, in which case they're cracked, but you also don't want to kill them because if you get the fiends low enough, they'll die anyways. And what you're really getting hedgehogs for is not to creep and not necessarily for the veterancy, but to put pressure on your opponent to find out what your opponent is doing. So while you are getting some value in making sure that these die, you're getting some veterancy, you're making sure that you don't have to expend an overcharge, you've got these super fast units that are on your side of the base or on your side of the map. And you don't know yet about your opponent's 3rd base or the fact that they got that imp because of the decision we said earlier about the scout. I'm pretty sure you would have traded the 40 Luminite or whatever you picked over the small health regeneration that you picked up with the scout to know that that 3rd base had been knocked down and has actually been up pretty safely this entire time, especially since this looked like it was a 1 base, then mix some army, then a 2 base play, which I actually think Vanguard would be well equipped to continue doing. Yep. A scout and 3 hedgehogs. Killing the last fiend is not actually the most important thing there, but I guess if you want the veterancy, you can. There's 2 shroud stones we want to know. I didn't see a lot of units die with the animus, but it's also units that die near you. Enemy and allied units that die near you give you animus. So I would love to have the question answered of, does Animus apply to when you split a brute into fiends using the Sunder Soul ability? I want to note actually that is a surprising amount of damage. Now, we've seen that the hedgehogs do like 30-40 damage. I said like 7 of them chunk a Magmadon's Veil in pretty much 1 or 2 shots, and Veil is 50% of a unit's health. But like, just it was poke, and the target actually, like, they only took some chip damage from the Shroud Stone. So if you're thinking that the Shroud Stone this is actually great because this is another little wargame comparison. The first time I saw Shroud Stone, I thought, oh, it's like a Warcraft 3 tower, right? It's going to be tanky, and then that's how it's going to do the consistent damage. And then I thought, oh, no, it's like a photon cannon. It's just going to go pew, 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 and do damage that way. They actually just look like little wargame towers. And little wargame towers, it's something you commonly tell new players, is that this can be a supplemental part of your defense. It's not number 1 of your defense. Like, calm it down, please. And so this Shroud Stone is actually going to go down, and with the lack of Animus, I think there's only 20 Animus that we're seeing here, so unless the ability was just used to spawn another Shroud Stone at the natural location, this is just the loss of the defensive structure, and the Felhog actually doesn't quite do its job of helping to defend, so this implies something about how you actually place the meat farms and the Shroud Stones, right? You place the meat farms in such a way that they are probably physically in front of the Shroud Stone. Now, the range of the Shroud Stone relative to there's a tether action that happens, right? Where here's the Shroud Stone, it wants to go over here, and here's the Hedgehogs, and they want to go over here. And if you put a unit in between, an interstitial unit or an interstitial building, such that the Hedgehogs can hit that but not get hit by the Shroud Stone, you're just taking free damage. So I understand why it was placed a bit vertically like that, but it does mean that the Felhogs weren't able to contribute to annoying the harass potential. Okay. So now we have actually a pretty good state over here. Yeah, it's not good because the third base is down. Oh, and there's not actually a split, and it was a double split, so this is actually pretty good. Okay. But on a macro level, right, these Hedgehogs, if they ever decide that they don't want to do damage anymore, the reason that Broken Crown Hinterlands looks pretty good for Vanguard is that with these 3 bases that TheoRy has decided to take, TheoRy has to attack up the right side, up the middle through double high ground, or over on the left side towards a possible third base location, and he hasn't gotten Fiends or Brutes over onto Azure's side any time recently, and so there's actually going to be a good bit of pressure, and then because there's creeping in this game once the pressure is over, as long as Azure doesn't stop pressuring at the exact moment that TheoRy is going to come like a storm and just gate all of Azure's progression into the nether realm and just crush his soul, all of these Hedgehogs can actually do a pretty good job of just going back to creeping, because remember what they're good at, like it's like 30 to 40 base damage on 1 to 4 rockets, they have a brief recharge, and they're great at hitting a single target, so hit big chickens, right? Now, you are going to get some damage. I want to note that, I don't know if that was constructed or not, or, yeah, it was canceled. We can see that the imp's body is down there. So it's important for anyone who's watching who doesn't know this. The meat farms generate 10 supply for Infernals. The Felhogs generate 2. And they're kind of like, honestly, the best that I can describe them as is, you know how in Zerg, when you kill them, you get the broodlings that spawn out to help tickle you afterwards? This is like if you just had 1 or 2 broodlings that were just next to your hatchery, and it doesn't do a ton of damage, but it's meant to help with defense, guard a little bit of the attacks, and I want to see if there's a med tech, not a med tech, if there's going to be a push for Sentinels, because that seems like it would be a natural follow-up, because anyways, so... Yeah. Okay, and the scout is going to pick this up, and it's a health regen. This is exactly what I was talking about before. As soon as the harassment potential has ended, and you're pretty sure your opponent is locked into 3 bases, you have your 2 bases, and you have your aggressive units out on the map. Now what you do is you grab as many creeps, and as many camps, and as many orbs, and as many benefits as you can, steal them from the map, and then use that to help equalize some of the economy, and allow your allow the pressure that you have to translate into vision and other intangibles. And the thing is, intangibles tend to be stronger than straight up army forces if there is a small difference between the forces, right? This is one of the reasons that spies were so highly paid in medieval warfare or pre-gunfire warfare. Hell, they were paid more, like paid a lot afterwards. But army deployments really matter. Okay, and now we're seeing something that I understand why this exists. Is this we saw this a lot in Willow Wargame. You would place a tower on the low ground, and in most games, your tower has a thing that's known in editors as vision height bonus, which very simply means it's like a Colossus in StarCraft 2. It can see up ramps. It can see up one height level, right? In most games, you have something like that. That's what we have in Little Wargame. And so you have to make high ground defense to deal with that. And the problem with that is these are Shroud Stones. You don't really want this many Shroud Stones because those are dead imps, right? And imps, this is economic damage, make no mistake. Also, with the high ground bonus, you can actually use the hedgehogs to attack on this ledge on the low ground, and that's insane extra value. And actually, I want to go back for a second, and we're going to notice something here. So this strongly implies that the range that you can hit for this natural is right here, and this is part of why I was talking about how hard it would be for Infernals to play Broken Crown Hinterlands. And I didn't know that vision height bonus applied to towers, but this is certainly contributing to that thought because now you have to control this central causeway that is south of your natural, and if you don't, you're in for a world of hurt. Also, that could just be canceled. It'll probably be completed, but that could just be canceled. And we're seeing more and more and more and more hedgehogs. Something I want to note in a difference to match 1, this is match 2, if you can use the command, right, bang Supercup, bang match 2. Something I want to note as a difference is that there's a lot of static defense that's getting placed down here on the part for this very early, very almost aggressively economic build on the part of TheoRy. And I'm not saying that it's not paying off, but he's paying the consequences of the decision, right? And what I mean by that is he's having to deal with the fact that he's getting tower rushed in classic RTS fashion. There is a sentry array. It probably has the ability to, you cannot control this unit. Okay, sick. And so once they have that, they're sniping the imps, and now the imps actually have to make some way to target and defend. And then the problem beyond all this is that a third base is going to be going up. So one of the things that I like about this is that this is actually an incredibly intelligent use of the things that I was saying about in the map control list and the map theory list, the one that has the commune pose that going like up to the sky, is that because the Infernal player has a really awkward choice of third base and they have a lot of stacked defense that they have to put between two locations that are quite far away, and there's not an actual easy funnel or a causeway, we'll get to that, for them to move all of their troops through. The number of points that you can attack as the faster faction, which I've said repeatedly that Vanguard are the faster faction, yes, even after the nerfs to the attack speed or the movement speed debuff that Scouts had. So all the hedgehogs are doing a good job here, but I actually think that their job is going to be done soon, and we should see them not applying any more pressure. At this point, I would love to see no more pressure going out. And why? The main base is fine. You're not bothering that. The natural has 2 Shroud Stones and a meat farm that already had to be built, defending it, but that's not defending the fact that there are no imps capable of putting anything in here. Putting in down more buildings is actually generating quite a lot of... putting down more buildings is generating a lot of space for you. For the first 2, everything afterwards is like, you had a cake, okay, this is the cake, and this is the icing on the cake, and you were like, you know what would make this cake better? Double icing. And I'm like, double icing doesn't substantially improve the cake as much as the first set of icing did, right? And that's what this is that if the only way that this goes really bad, so the way this is going well for Vanguard right now is use the superior speed, got more map objectives, got more creep in, right? These are all things that I've talked about. Fairly, like control of the bottom causeway. The Infernal player really struggles to have a 4th base because this is not Secluded Grove. And so they've put over defenses on their 3rd and on their natural. The natural is now basically sacked. There are no imps making anything over there, even after multiple attempts to make static defense and other things to help defend it. So we know that there's cancellation fees, much like if you were signing up with an internet provider and you just decide you don't want it after 45 days, but they've got you in a 6-month contract. just an oddly specific set of circumstances that's definitely never happened in my life. So the third base looks like it's good, but it's got 3 Shroud Stones. One was already destroyed, then there are meat farms backed into a wall. And there is deathly fear on the part over here of TheoRy. The only way that this goes really badly is if the 4th base gets captured on the bottom right-hand side for Infernals with seemingly no care, no protection, no defense, nothing, or if all of these units keep trying to have not just double icing, but triple icing, quadruple icing, quintuple icing, sextuple icing, octonillion icing, and then run all of the hedgehogs down. You've done enough economic damage. You've killed imps, you've put a lot of stack defense down in the natural and in the third. Even though you missed the opportunity to get some information with the scout, you still have control of the central causeway. You're gonna know when they make a move out or deal with the force that you've put of buildings for the sentry posts down by the bottom, on the bottom side of the ramp of the natural. Just take the rest of the static objectives on the map, go grab your own 3rd base, and then roll the dice and find out what feels good, right? For your next set of army units. Okay? All you have to do, I say all you have to do, they're probably playing at a very high APM currently, but all you have to do is control the central causeway, right? That is in front of the Infernal player. Stop trying to have, is that a Sentinel? Nope. Support craft. Yeah. So this is good, right? That shrine is kind of dead, and we saw that the vision camp is just rescinded on the top upper left-hand side. Jeez, is that a 4-minute vision camp? That lasts for so freaking long. So here is the only way I was saying that this goes badly. I said the only way that this goes badly is if you try to force more, and that's a lot of brutes. So here's how. Just watch. So these are the hedgehogs. These hedgehogs are an integral part of the army. The reason the hedgehogs are an integral part of the army is that this is the static defense by which if this breaks into mass fiends, the hedgehogs can run past and defend. And as long as Azure doesn't lose pretty much all of these, they're in a good spot. Because they did enough economic damage that TheoRy had to make a ton of brutes in order to have enough fiends to get the trap, which means that there aren't as many gaunts as would otherwise normally be used. And we do see a rally, and there is going to be a walk forward and giant split at some point. Yep. There we go. Yeah, notice that's not going down. And with the rally coming forward here, if all of these break into fiends, all of these hedgehogs either die or it gets very close, and then we will have a 2.5 base, or 3 base gone down to 2 base versus a 2 base that went up to 3 base. The economic circumstance, even though there's intangibles like map vision, map pace, like the pace of the game is being set over here by Azure. The control of the map objectives has been set by Azure. But the economic state for how late that they've grabbed their 3rd is actually not that great for Azure. And the shrine hasn't died. If this shrine was dead, it's almost okay if this happens because you're very far ahead economically as long as it's not just a complete wipe on the other side. But, yeah. Yep. Some fiend splits, and they're going to get rid of the support towers. Remember what I said previously. If this is ever under attack, then you run the hedgehogs away. All of these are split into fiends. There is a lot of veil down here. I would not. No. Okay. Yeah, the fiends are barely not fast enough, but I want to note that the hedgehogs are clipping around corner and bumping into each other, and the fiends are kind of like jockeying for position, like crabs in a bale kind of way. And now this is the test of, has enough time been bought for this to happen? If all these fiends die and a lot of veterancy comes down, then this is great. If this is a big surround, it's kind of over. That cast right there is going to put the hedgehogs in a very precarious state, because the hedgehogs now, if they die, they spawn themselves more fiends, and there are defensive structures that are over here. So, yeah, a lot of fiends are going to go down, but they not really. So I want to note, Therium's not being mined over here. Remember what I said about how it's 2 rising 3 base to 3, now cut to 2 base economy, and the economy is quite similar? One way that this goes badly is a lot of dead bobs. And we look, and a bunch of fiends are going to die. We didn't see them in the main, but a bunch of fiends are going to die. And we don't have supply. But I want you to note, so the way that this is traded economically is the standing forces still exist for your boy. The standing forces still exist in the form of hedgehogs for Azure and Azure, and TheoRy has just lost all of their brutes and the fiends that they split into, and generated a lot of Vanguard experience or veterancy for his opponent, but he did manage to clear out the area that is in front of his third. The problem is that the cost was at something like over half a dozen, but under a dozen. I want to say like 9 or 10 brutes. Seems about right. They did get 2 overcharges and then seemingly a couple of workers, but they used their one of their shroud abilities in order to do that. And there is some poking here, and I want to notice the blob that's happening on the middle side that's now going up to the right, right? This is almost the disbelief that, like, well, surely you're actually, like, no, right? Like, you don't, do you have your 4th base, a sweep and an indication that no, they don't? And now the causeway correction and ownership has changed. Keep in mind that all of the fiends that have been split are going to die eventually, so you might as well get something with them. And now the problem is that this is now a 4 going on 5 base player against a 4 base player. And so everything previously looked quite good. The control of that causeway looked good. Even the defense against the fiends looked good. But during during all of that time, right, the rate of expansion is quite different. So the rate of expansion over here, the hedgehogs are looking good, and they got out, and they didn't die in silly fashion. But the rate of expansion for the Infernal player is looking very good. And the longer that the game goes on, the closer the Veil is going, or the closer the Shroud will get, is the closer the Veil will get. And a lot of units died, which means there are more Shroud Stone abilities. And so now, instead of reaching the 50% mark of the causeway into their 75%, into the other 25%, into the basically that lower causeway that was south of the natural, that was all the control of Azure. Once that was given up, it was fine that they defended and used 2 overcharges and blocked a bunch of fiends. The problem is that there was crazy expansion and a continuous creation of brutes afterwards. And the problem with the creation of brutes is there are a lot of fiends, and we saw what the defense had to be last time for the hedgehogs. They had to turn tail and run, use an overcharge, go back to a defensive area, and what I said before still applies. If these get surrounded, it is the end of the game, because these are the early game army microable units that can justify having been picked because they won't be swarmed by fiends. If they're picked up, especially if there is the shroud ability like Bring Darkness or something like that, that infests these and generates more fiends, then there will not actually be enough things to defend the 4th base. And the problem with that is that they're also fiends. One of the benefits of fiends I haven't seen people talk about, at least publicly, I'm sure in Discords they're mentioning it, is that fiends can go through light terrain. They can go through the forest, through the trees, right? They can see the forest for the trees and the trees for the forest. They've achieved infernal enlightenment. And so think about the other way. There was never really a risk that the hedgehogs were going to kill all of the fiends unless the fiends just committed to inting. But because of the relative number of the fiends, there is a risk that a big surround will happen, and then all of these units will die. And like a moment from the campaign of a Blizzard RTS, that do be what look to be. Now, all of those are going to survive. We did see one that has veterancy, and there are a couple of fiends coming in, but this is going to have to trigger an overcharge and a defense, and there is a possibility that this massive fiends, they're going to go check the 4th base location, and they don't see it there. And then when they don't see it there, they can go into the 4th base location that is north of the upper left-hand vision camp. Yep, they get the vision camp, and that's exactly what they're doing. Okay, so cool. Hedgehog Lancers. Here's the thing. I'm not the biggest fan of Lancers. Like, I get what they're doing. This is very much like Soldier Gatling gun, right? is that you just have Gatling guns, and Gatling guns are fast mobile units in Little Wargame, not quite as fast as the Hedgehog. And then if units get close to them, you have soldiers, and they just beat the units. That's what's going on here. The problem is, at this point, we have only seen brutes, and unless this is a, like, is it imbo or do I suck? Like, unless this is somehow transforming into, like, Hearthstone Balance Wine, a Hearthstone Balance Wine, like, request for commentary and analysis, pretty sure Theory's not just going to have mass fiends, mass brutes. Also, remember what I said before about how the speed camp is actually just bonus health for fiends. Yeah, we're gonna see it. They're fast. Notice now that the ball is literally in the court of Theory. So Theory, all of the things that made Theory weaker in the game, all of that pressure is evaporated, and the staying power that the Lancers promised did not deliver early enough. The staying power of having something to complement the Hedgehogs. There was a very scary push over at the Natural, but there was not actually enough stuff to beat the Fiends where they were, and that gave up map control. Once you gave up map control, you realize that your opponent had 3 bases and was securing a 4th, and you were attempting to secure a 4th, but now the battle is being fought in the middle of the map. And the problem with the middle of the map is that Theory has checked multiple times to make sure that this base right here isn't being captured, and because this base isn't being captured, that whole Infernals question of, like, do you go to the center to their natural, or do you go to the left to this base, or do you go to the right over here? The decision has actually been made, right? The Infernals player in Theory can that's a funny pun. Theory, the Infernal player, can, in theory, see where his opponent's, or where their opponent's base is most forward, and then just attack that point and expand towards that point. And in fact, that's why, after this base was captured, there were some other possibilities for map expansion, but this is the one that was taken because this is the one that pushes forward into here, and this creates that feeling very much like that Karnak, that Fabius Stronghold, that Jagged Ball, if you're a Stormgate fan, of how about you and I just have a big old fight? And remember, the more fights, the more animus, and the more animus, the more likely that Flayed Dragon gets animated. Yeah, and there are a couple of gaunts. I actually love what Theory is doing here. There aren't an infinite number, some huge overwhelming swath of gaunts. There's actually just a couple, right? Fiends are for map control and wrestling it back from my opponent. There's a Magmadon right here. These Fiends are going to go to the health camp, which seems pretty good because you know what's better than the effective health of a speed camp? The real health of a health camp. And it's just another unit just lumbering over here, just making sure that there's no possibility you're actually taking this. And notice now that while Azure was playing very well, you want to expand out away from your opponent by creating a vortex of attack over here on the side. Now Theory can move all of his forces, gather them up like a swelling storm from the upper right, up through his natural, up through his third, and attack into the upper left. It doesn't matter that the middle right portion of the map hasn't been taken or that people are rarely interacting with it. It doesn't even matter that this base hasn't been taken. All Theory needs to know is where is the brunt of the attack. Your forces primarily consisted of Hedgehogs. If I attack them, at a certain point, they can't leave. Right? Wouldn't surprise me if this brute sits here for a very long time to make sure they can kill the Bob or anything associated with that. And we are seeing a Vulcan. The Vulcan is in theory for the mass. The Vulcan is in theory for the mass fiend, right? Because the Vulcan publicly has been said to have a cone of damage. So you have the Lancers in the front. When they take damage, they can retreat if things get too bad. There's Hedgehogs in the back who will help with the Magmadons or anything that'll hit with, and then they'd also just do decent damage and are very microable, have good kiting ability. And then the Vulcan is I stand and deliver and fight. But I would have to get in, but I would love to see if what would be better than the Vulcan would actually be, like, Sentinels for the Hedgehogs. Like, how much more tanky do they get with the 50% reduction? Isn't enough to stand and deliver, or with medtechs for the Lancers, right? Basically, the army is catty corner, right? Each piece makes sense, but the combination, I don't really know how you move them, because armies move at the rate of the slowest unit that is being moved as part of the army. So if your army were Atlases and Exa, or Atlases and Scouts, right? You would say, well, that's a slow army. No, it's not. The scout is very fast. If it doesn't move with the Atlas, that's a fast army. Okay, what about this army, right? Vulcan, Hedgehog, and Lancer. Well, the Hedgehog's very fast in Micro Bowl, and the Lancers get faster whenever they get hit. That should be a pretty fast army. Well, it's actually not, because now the army its speed control is gated by the Vulcan. The Vulcan is supposed to be there for the overlapping area of effect damage against Fiends, because there have been so many Fiends. I mean, there's multiple tiers of tower defense over here. Man thinks that he's playing either Bloons Tower Defense 5, or he's playing, oh my gosh, what, Defense Grid The Awakening, which is actually a banger game, and you should play that. If you have $10, go buy Defense Grid The Awakening. It's the best tower defense game I've ever played. Trust me, I've been looking for them. I understand why these turrets exist. I understand why they're even placed the way that they are. Right? But the problem is now is that for all that map control and all of that funness over on TheoRy's side of the causeway, now the causeway is irrelevant. We have a central high ground, and so whoever breaks the parity is the person who will be asserting dominance. And the real problem is there's not really an easy 5th base location, right? Like, there's not a 5th base location over here for Azure. So Azure has to go grab the area that this brute knows of. Right, we're gonna see some Vulcans tear through this area. We saw them poking at it earlier, but that's gonna pose a problem. Like, that 5th base has to come from one place. It has to come there, and also it could come from here, but notice that both of these are defended by this brute move out. With the brutes moving out to the center up through here, they're just casually checking whether or not this base is being taken, this forward base is being taken. Now, we are seeing the Magmadons do tear through, which is kind of unfortunate because they just helped their opponents. But it's still fine, right? Because if there are enough forces there aren't enough forces on the top left-hand side. And that base on the right still has to be taken. And so this is an excellent example of the power of winning by doing nothing, right? Now, nothing sounds dismissive. I don't want to say nothing as in, wow, you just hands off the keyboard, huh? No, nothing like that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that Azure has a lot of very difficult problems that have to be solved, and TheoRy's answer to the problem is, I just have to keep forces here and make sure you don't take either of these 2 bases, and then I win, because this is in fact an economic game. And also, by the way, my army is stronger than yours in a straight up fight, I'd be willing to bet. So we do get a Bob overcharge and a lot of Fiends, and a lot of these turrets are going to go down. Right, and there is a sad little Exo with Veterancy trying really hard, as a lot of Fiends do end up dying, but the static defense dies as well. And the reason that the static defense dying matters quite a bit is that, in theory, the second time that the static defense, like the first time the static defense is there, the second time the static defense won't be there, and at this point you just assume that Fiends are something you can pick up and throw away. They're not Magmadons, they're not Gaunts, right? They're not these Therium-based units. And you know that your opponent is trying to expand over here, so they have to send considerable forces, and that's a very long distance, especially when you are only as fast as the slowest unit, the Vulcan. Poor Magmadon is going to die, and that resource camp is going to be up soon. And the problem is that now I suspect we're going to have a game of ping pong, okay? Crash level 1 was to get rid of the static defense and an overcharge. Crash level 2 is going to get rid of, if not all of the mobs, certainly all of the defense and another overcharge. And then crash number 3 will say, where do you want to go? If you wanted to take the base over here on the side as Azure, right? And then you wanted to go up and to the left, you probably had to do something disgusting like push down from here, or try and grab this and then sneak back over here. And in fact, the position of this base right here does make me think that 1, 2, 3, 4 is actually the appropriate answer, especially since Azure had all of the map control. A lot of map control with the Hedgehogs, and then if the Hedgehogs ever run into danger here, they can run back up into this location. That makes that a more an easier base to capture later. 1 second. Cool. I thought I heard something. We're going to check. What I like about this game is that it's actually shaking. I don't like that it looks like it's shaping up into a loss for Azure. What I like about this is that this is the kind of game plan, the kind of early unit harassment focused game plan that I was postulating in the map theory video that I just dropped, which is from the stream yesterday. And we see exactly how effective it can be, right? And off of not a fast expand, off of a one racks opening. So lots of lots of pickups here. And the problem is that now normally this central pathway is a problem for Infernals, but it's usually a problem for Infernals in the earlier stages of the game. Where do you move your army when you have a small number of low lumbering, like basically like not even cackling? They can't even cackle in speed. It's like, that's their laughter. That's how slowly these poor things are moving before they sundersoul. But this is now entering into what happens in, I wouldn't say late game, but like mid-late game for Rax versus Beast, okay? So the faster faction in Little Wargame of Beast basically gets to dictate a lot of the facets of the pace of the game. Once they get out of the early game, there's a lot of complexities to that, but we're going to skip that for now because you're not here to watch that game. But trust me, there's a lot more going on than I'm letting on just for the people who are here for Little Wargame. But once you get to the point that you are hitting a very high supply count, or there are enough physical units that you're blocking up pathways, like, oh, here's this corridor. Well, 1 and 2 units don't really do much. But if my fist is moving through, okay, maybe that's not enough. But if this wall is moving through, you can't get surface area. You can't leverage your speed. That is a doom scary force. Okay. We've hit that point. There are now enough infernal units that doing cute things with hedgehogs is out, straight up fights are in, and you still have these hedgehogs that really haven't found a whole lot of purchase, right? Now, Vision Camp level 3, it looks like the rate at which the camp grows depends on how many times it has been taken out, which is brilliant. It's really cool. That also is going to lead to jungler-like pathing. We see that in MOBAs. In League of Legends, obviously, we use the term jungler quite a bit. Various positions in Dota, that's because jungling is not a dedicated role, right? But we did this in another RTS that had creeping elements. And I can say that because publicly people knew about it, is Guardians of Atlas, right? But one of the things is there was always a right place to be in creeping in that game and in some other places. Some other games that I've seen have this, right? By having the camp scale based on the number of times it's been defeated, you're actually asking your opponents a question similar to dragon stacking, right? In League of Legends. How quickly do you want to force this to start scaling up? It's actually a really interesting design decision because it means that you have to have a game plan and then you pay for the consequences of that game plan later. So, but make no mistake, these are not here for the Vision Camp. They're here for the Shroudstone so that they can get Veil. The closer that they are with their Veil, the more threatening these units are as straight up forms before they have to start splitting. And that was a lot of resources that got invested in the upper left hand side. We can see by movement. So this is not here for the Vision Camp, right? They are not here for the Vision Camp. They are here, make no mistake, for that base on the upper left hand side. We do see basically the entirety of the army moving over here on the right-hand side. And actually, the more I'm looking at it, the more I think 1, 2, 3, 4, this Zephyr, this Z pattern is actually the right count of bases to take, right? Main, natural, then this third, then you push for this to be the fourth. And the reason that you do that is that when you have this fourth, you're like, oh, but where do I go from there? Well, you just send a Frond out this way, right? Now, the reason you don't do it the other way is that if you do 1, 2, 3, 4 like this, you have this sore point up in the upper left-hand side, and then moving the base over here gets really like wonky and weird, and actually this like puts whoever controls the center of the map is dominating you if you have this like squid tentacle position, but if you take the more aggressive forward position, then you start getting control of the center. The only downside I could think of to actually taking this base right here or having the Z pattern is that the Infernals player, like their natural is right here, right? And so they could just do this, and that's actually a very close distance for them. So man, it's not a scenario that I would want to be in right now. I'm pretty sure you actually want the side bases as much as possible, but I could see why you would take the Z as well. I'll have to think more on that. This meat farm and trad zone are going up, and that should probably be canceled. And since it's not canceled, it's just going to be some lost resources. Yep. But again, notice this army is only as fast as its slowest units, which are the Vulcans. The Vulcans are going to take. This is a kind of scary fight, but remember how all of those units were moving up and down the Central Causeway. They're going back up towards the Vision, and the reason that they're doing that is we hear an amazingly massive, gigantic, look at the blood and gore that's right there. So this is kind of why you want to control the center, and you want your speed units to care about the center a little bit more, is that wherever you appear, if your opponent has the center, wherever you appear, they know they can attack the opposite side. And what's funny is, this is the slower faction. Infernals are the slower faction. Until they have fiends. And keep in mind, they have fiends whenever they want. That doesn't mean they're the faster faction. There are consequences to doing that. But the later in the game it gets, the more that they are the faster faction, because they're closer to you. This is like a hilarious and actually stupendous number. Like, it's actually, geez, it's actually causing some problems with, like, they look like they're bowling. All right, and I want you to note how long, notice the reverse of the scenario that we had previously, right? Now the center of the map is controlled by the Infernal player TheoRy, and we can see that the causeway that he was using to give so much grief on the opposite side is now Azure's pain point. There is a full wall over here, which is nice, but the cut-in is also very good. There's just too much. I think that's why you want the Z more. There's just too many spaces to defend, right, going this way. There will probably be an overcharge if one can be purchased and there cannot. So that makes me think that there's some economic benefit that you can do. The Hedgehogs can get there very quickly. Everything else cannot. And if memory serves, there will be a big dumb fight. The poor Hedgehogs are in the front. That feels really unfortunate. And because of the full wall, these fiends will not retreat, or they will not get away and do anything. But notice that the game is basically over. And the reason I say that is, looks very good from the beginning for Azure, but this fourth base, with this sore point, right, this base having to be taken at some point if the game got long enough, this is like what we could say, well, this is the end of the game. This was the pain point. I actually think that the pain point really was earlier, when the plan for dealing with the I'm tired of your shit fiend burst over here at the causeway there was not enough either tech units or economy purchased off of the very solid, very good game plan that Azure had, right? So like the first portion of this game, I actually think you're going to look at this now and say, oh man, Infernals can't win. It's terrible. Nobody, like, unplayable matchup, awful, garbage, don't do it. It's just the worst. Pretty sure you actually want this game plan. You want what is getting done over here by Azure up until the choice to take that upper left-hand side base. That's a lot of Weavers, by the way. And the problem is that Weavers don't really care about your motley crew army, right? This is the tech advantage, and this is only happening, by the way, because if we count bases, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bases, pretty much unperturbed from 2 to 5 base economy, right? As soon as the Fiend split happened, and that was reacted to in a purely defensive, non-reactive manner, that was pretty much the point at which the Infernals player just said, I can keep up the pressure as long as I would like. Now, I will say all of the static defense is actually showing us something that we will not see in a lot of these other games, which is we didn't see a lot of gaunts in this game. I want you to think about that, what that actually means, right? If you have static defense, then the gaunts can't infest the static defense, and that means that there's inefficient returns on investment. This is something that we see in Little Wargame with people thinking that, like, you know, Archer Mage is a good composition. That would be the equivalent, kind of having mass gaunts or a lot of gaunts, right? And the reason people stopped doing that was there were just some problems in the strategy that the strategy itself couldn't overcome, and one of them is that that's a very good DPS versus army. Very, very bad against towers, right? Because mages have fireballs, and the fireballs don't want to be spent on towers because that doesn't lower the supply of your opponent in a chunky, satisfying way. Same thing here. Gaunts don't want to show up. There's nothing to infest. I actually think that the play here from Azure has showed far more insight in the theory crafting side for the first half of this, right? I think the game plan was looking really good up until the Fiend break. And then, yeah, I mean, there's Flayed Dragons. There's a bunch of Weavers. Now, with Bob Overcharge and the Flayed Dragons, I actually think that this is holdable, right? Bobs are, like, good. Yeah, and Theory thinks so as well. There's a disgusting number of Weavers that are not going to, in fact, leave in a mass charge forward. But I don't actually think it matters. This is a lot of Animus to have been generated. There is still the Flayed Dragon, right? And the Flayed Dragon can infest all of those units. If this battle, the reason I don't like this is that I understand he doesn't have a choice because the upper left-hand base has been wrecked, but if Azure starts losing, for you the viewer, I think Azure is doing what he has to do, which is he kind of has to like do some serious economic damage and then try and take the base that's in the middle and just accept that there's too much static defense and too much vision control in the upper left-hand corner, and that maybe that shouldn't have been the base taken in the first place. So he has to attack this and then try and secure the base that is on the middle right-hand side, and it's not going to happen. But there's a ton of possibility here for these units if infest. Ooh. Yeah, the Flayed Dragon or the Shroudstone, I can't tell which, is going to cast the infest. And then if any of these, this looks bad, but if any of these units die, it gets worse from here. I actually love the medtechs with the Vulcans. But I think that actually that the Vulcans skipped a step. I don't think that the Vulcans actually provided a lot of value here relative to what the MedTech, I believe that's the MedTech Master Training ability. The MedTech Master Training ability around Lancers that are assisted defensively by Bobs or just attacking offensively is going to be an absolute nightmare. Like, look at how tanky these Vulcans are with the Master Training, like Nano Resurgence, I believe it's called. Nano something something to that effect. But yep. There's going to be a tap out here. And the reason there's going to be a tap out is that base is mined out. There's only 2 mining bases. This hasn't been secured. You know? And so he's going to win the battle. He might not even win the battle as the reinforcements are continuously streaming in, but also the medtechs don't have infinite mana, right? This is why I actually think, I remember when I did my review of Vanguard units and I said this is a unit I would look at for being overpowered, and let the record show I came up with that assessment before we had the Supercup games, right? You can check the record time of the video. It also was something that I got off of stream, and I was saying if I'm looking for a unit that is probably way too damn good, I'm looking at the medtech. Honestly, the medtech looks like kind of insanely goated. Yeah, this is good. Good luck. Have fun. This is GG from Azure, and he's tapping out. I want to note, played a 19-minute game, give or take a couple of seconds. What was the loss condition? Really, just not quickly enough having either the units or the economy built up behind from all of the excellent harassment that was done. It was a 2 going to 30 base economy, right, that had just nearly killed the Shrine and rendered Theory as a 3 going down to 2 base player. As soon as that moment was over, you could see that was the decisive moment of the game. Azure had to build a lot more stacked defenses, had to respect the unit count a lot more, started going into things like Vulcans, which aren't particularly good, it looks like, against Weavers, but are more for the mass fiends, but there was too much. Basically, once he went from 2 base economy to 3 base economy, and still wasn't quite punished, Theory was, for his very fast third base. He was punished somewhat, but not maybe as hard as he could have been if the scout had stuck around. He then went from 2 base economy to 3 base economy, back to 2 base economy, back to the moon. He just went back all the way to 5 base economy and just sent the entire thing, right? Good win. On to game 2. So I want to note that was broken Hinterlands. Okay, we've talked about this. I probably am going to get crap for this. I'm not saying that I don't know how you win as Vanguard on this map. What I will say is that theory-wise, man, oh man, oh man, do I feel like Infernals has an excellent strategy for this map that's gifted to them, I want to say. For anyone who missed it, you just choose which 2 points you want to guard. Usually you guard here, but like you can guard here by the Therium and here just southeast of the Vision Camp if you're Theory, or you can guard to the bottom left-hand side between the Health and the Vision Camp, and then you guard this area if you want to be really cheeky. But usually you just guard the area by the Therium, the area right by this secluded, like, hooked base. You get a Magmadon, you go through here, you have a googly-eyed salamander-looking position for all of your units and buildings if you drew them out on the map, and then you have a salamander, so you draw the salamander's tongue, you attack down this pathway right here. And whether you attack down this pathway into the natural, or you attack down this pathway over into here, or to get some camps, doesn't really matter. You're in a good spot. Now, Theory actually showed, or rather, Azure showed, what's funny is, he lost as Theory crafted a return, but I would love to see the Theory craft of Azure here on this map. How do you play on this map? What are the difficulties on this map? And this, also the fact that we have seen the games kind of consistently been on Secluded Grove and Broken Crown Hinterlands. It does make me wonder if those were statically arranged to just guaranteed B maps 1 and 2, and 3rd was always going to be Jagged Maw, but not enough games got to it. Or if this is a pick selection from the players, or if they both agree to ban one, or, is it pick, and then the third, usually when you have 4, it's something like the first person bans a map, the other person picks a map, you pick a map, and then, you pick a map, and then you basically get access to your choice of map for round number 2, and you're basically setting what the other one is for 3. Wait, what? Oh, okay, 2 imps. I thought he had split up a Sundered Soul. Yeah, you want to send this attack. Send it south. Send it south. It's literally the most important thing. The scout should be bothering you. Okay, so let's go back a little bit because we weren't talking. Again, I think the scout can commit to death here. Right? I think that if you are the scout, yes, you lose on some pickups, but if you lose on some pickups, if you have a Fiend, and then if your opponent has Brute, and they split the Thunder Soul into 2 Fiends, and then your scout dies, and you don't have information, you feel really sad. But if you are a fast expanding player, I would take that trade 100% of the time. As it turns out, if you are a 1-Rax player, or if you're doing the more aggressive thing that we saw in Broken Crown Hinterlands by Azure, I wouldn't do that in the slightest. More units is more better, because your scout is actually meaningful hit points, not necessarily DPS, but hit points to assist your hedgehogs. Yeah. So the scout here, I assume that Azure is thinking that by seeing the 2 imps move out, that is enough to guarantee that these units are moving out. Yep, there's a base taken over there. We see Light Forest Doggo doing his work, and we have to wonder why the imp is moving all the way down the way that it is. Just a 1 vault opening thus far. Not much to say. Is it possible that is the imp still with him? Because that would answer the question of how much damage do you want to take on the Brute? Do you need the imp to help you with that, or can you just generate it easily? And actually, once again, we see this 1-Rax, or we see this mech bay opening on 1 base. I really respect what Azure is doing here, right? Yeah, that building just made, yeah. Yep, just made. It's going to start building. And it doesn't look like a barracks was actually made. There's going to be a Bob overcharge. And yes, the Therium worker is the one that you want to attack. And as soon as this comes out, there's going to be a split. Come on. You have an overcharged Bob. Okay, all right. Ooh, yeah. This is what we saw. This is why the imp was brought, right? This is actually also a clever game out of here from Theory. I don't think it was necessary, right? And when I say I don't think it's necessary, I don't mean it's bad. What I mean is I think the game plan is so good for Infernals here that sure you could do this, but like, okay, and the plan here is bring the imp, set up the Shroud Stone while the Brute gets out there, gets some damage. That you did generate an overcharge, and if it's the Hedgehog opening, you have time to make sure that your Shroud Stone is actually started and then finished, and then you can cover the 2 points on the map that I discussed previously, right? Actually, it looks like TheoRy is actually deciding not to go for the hook base over here and instead just hold this. This speaks very much to me of I'm just going to go right into the double base if the game even gets that long. This is another pretty long one. I want to note, right? Shroud Stones are up. This will actually be taken out. So the game plan for here is really weird because you do have the value of, oh yes, I managed to kill the Shroud Stone. You can feel pretty good about that. The problem is that you now have to deal with an opponent who is threatening to fully wall, take 3 bases, and laugh at your attempts to do anything else. And because you have chosen to make Hedgehogs, which are not scouts, they can't go through the light terrain, and they'll take some pretty good damage as they move through. And with 2 Shroud Stones and 1 or 2 meat farms at each location, you are taking a loan. If you're TheoRy, right? You're saying, this is fine. This is okay, right? My plan is very simple. I'm going to defend these 3 locations. I'm going to have access to 2 Therium and 3 Luminite ore. And there's no way that you can get past this with your Hedgehogs. Now, I want to note that what happened in Game 1 was very much using this 1 base play to get the fast Hedgehogs to then put on pressure and then punish a very fast 3 bases from TheoRy. This seems to be a wrinkle that makes more good happen out of this. I don't even know if I would go after the Vision Camp because you're faster than everything then Fiends, and again if Fiends are splitting to get their level 1 Vision Camp on their own side, you celebrate. Nice. Yep. And with the damage that's done here, the thing is that will this Vision Camp go up? Yeah. It's a Jack, unfortunately. That's super unfortunate. Problem is that while that's going down, where's the offense that we saw in the first game? In the first game, because of the contours of the map, there was a lot of harassment on both sides, trying to like poke off buildings, trying to get some early pokes for fell hogs, trying to take down, we saw some Shroud Stones attempt to go up and then down, and then we saw a tower push of the natural. There's no opportunity here to tower push the natural because you would be pushing towers into towers. Therefore, your plan here is that you have Hedgehogs and they're fast and they have good speed control, but your opponent doesn't care about the other 70% of the map. They just care about the quarter or third of the map that is under their control. Because that's 3 bases, and do you have 3 bases? Hell no, you just finished your natural. Now, I will say, again, the plan here for Infernals, it looks really easy. You make sure you don't die. This is point number 1. Yeah, there's a check there to make sure, oh, you didn't go for that super greedy base down there. Of course not, because otherwise the Shroud Stones and the meat farms would be placed lower. And in fact, they're probably held at the location that they are because that is a thinner area than this is right here. And also the Vision Camp is less likely to see the full totality of what's going on there. So Azure, like TheoRy, was not going to take that base, and now it is a fast 3rd base over here, but this again is where the map I think is going to bring problems. The Hedgehogs aren't going to find the same purchase, the same value that they did in the previous game, and the tower push can't really happen in the same way. What was the follow-up, if you remember, after the tower push? It was Lancers. Now, do we think that Lancers and Hedgehogs could break through this? Yes, but do we think that that's going to pose a problem if there are a lot of Fiends and the economy goes up? Probably. Because Fiends, once made, are then faster than the Hedgehog army because without their ability, without their upgrade, the Lancers are slower. they're kind of noticeably slower. And maybe they don't want to take the fight, but you just have to just sit on these bases until you have enough stuff, and you'll be fine. Notice that there are defensive, but the counter swing potential is quite scary. The more I'm looking on this map, at least, or in general at hedgehogs, hedgehogs look like if you're winning, get more of them. If you're winning, have a ton of them, have fun, stomp your opponent, collect your elo, like do what you got to do. I actually think that there is a magic number for them. We talk about this in other games, but there's got to be a number at which you have enough hedgehogs to one-shot or two-shot insert thing. Once you have enough to one or two shot insert thing, whatever that thing is, right? You could say, I want enough to one shot a Felhog. I want enough to like take all the veil off of a brute in a single go, right? I want to be able to like pull them back and then focus fire, and then I just kill. I have enough to kill two fiends at once, right? Because that way I can help like mitigate some of the benefits of splitting. Or I want to get these in and then make them hit imps somehow. So I need to figure out what that number is. Find out what the magic number is for medbay or for hedgehogs from the medbay, and then stop there. This plan of I'm gonna have more hedgehogs, they seem to have diminishing returns, right? They are a very fast unit, they're a very microable unit, but eventually the reason they have diminishing returns is actually that 10-point scale I talk about a lot, where both players, when playing well, are at 10 points, and then it's up to the map or the factions or their decisions to change the values there. I actually think that going from whatever that magic number is that we're going to find out in a couple of months, right, when people are playing and practicing and grinding and there's money on the line and they really want to figure it out. The number from that magic number, the difference between that magic number and 15, which it seems like everybody wants to make as their hedgehog count, it's not that the hedgehogs get worse. They actually just stay at a 10. But the problem is that their ability to deal fight in a straight up fight is always bad, right? On a straight up fight perspective, they're like a 4. Or a 5, okay, out of 10. And as the game goes on, your opponent's army gets big enough that they are more likely to be able to force you to go to the straight up fight part of the game, part of the interaction. And so you're taking the hedgehog and you're not making it worse, you're just taking it from being at its 10, right, of its normal efficacy, of its just a baseline 10, to it now has to do the main army fight thing at about a 5, right? Its time for harassment is over. It has now gotten worse. Sorry, time to catch my breath. I don't think that these 5 hedgehogs, while threatening, are actually going to pierce through this defense, and the reason is that we now have a couple of units. Yes, one of the Shroud Stones is going to go down, and another one is being made. We can see that right now. The Felhogs, however, have done a bit of damage, and there has been a bit of poke that's happened from the Shroud Stones into that, and there's not really any other objectives to grab. I mean, I guess you could get the speed camps that are over here and over here, but if the speed is a flat value, then its percentage return on investment seems pretty bad for hedgehogs. And if it's a percentage value, again, you're already faster than everything else. Being more faster than everything else when what you're fighting is a brick wall doesn't seem like it's particularly effective. So I do think in this instance, Azure is doing the same game plan from game 1, but the different circumstances mean that he is running into a spear, right? First one, he had his hedgehogs, he got on his horse, and he charged, and the cavalry strike was great. Game 2, he took his cavalry, and he attacked a superior commander, and the commander had ordered all of his people to make spears and pikes. And then he ran into the pikemen. This is implied to be that same push, by the way, or it's a repair facility. Yeah, it's a repair-o-matic. The thing is about this repair-o-matic, I don't see how these are ever going to get damage done. I know what the purpose is. The purpose of the repair-o-matic is get in, do enough damage, and then when my units are damaged enough, run all the units back to the repair-o-matic and continuously do that. Your buildings can't recover as quickly as I can using the effects of this building. All is right with the world. Everything is great. Problem is that I just don't believe he's ever going to break triple Shroud Stone and double Meat Farm on both of these sides. Or, sorry, triple Shroud Stone and 1 Meat Stone, or a Meat Stone. Let's get it right, shall we? And 1 Meat Farm on both sides. And because there are now units, right? Because we now have brutes, there's a lot of effective hit points that can just soak up random damage, right? If the brutes sit in front and they take shots, Shroudstone's not taking shots, that looks pretty good. If the brutes sit in front and the Shroudstone takes shots, you have the opportunity to walk up and hit. And it's not that this is a permanent solution, it's that this buys time. And what is it buying time for? I love that the Shroudstone fades away into ash. That's perfectly fitting, by the way. He is going to get the Vision Camp level 2, and the benefit of that is that you're going to know what your opponent's doing. But actually, these units have been knowing what his opponent is doing for a very long time anyways. We're getting to the point where the brutes are going to snap into their fiend mode and then fly back out. And then we're going to hit the same question. Did you swap off of your medbay, off of your Hedgehog love quickly enough? And what did you get? If it's Lancers, like in the first game, that's going to go really badly. And there are, in fact, enough brutes that if they get this around in any cool way or in any interesting way, it will be a wipe. So they're going to move out here. Notice the damage. I want to notice, right? Oh my gosh, what a clunky... Like, what I paused at the perfect time again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 of them seemed like they were actually nailing the veil off of 1, but it was probably only 4 of them hitting at the same time. And we know that at least in this build, that the Brute is a 190/95 unit, meaning 190 hit points and 95 veil. Same problem as we had in the previous game. Now the Hedgehogs have to run away because there have been enough brutes generated that you can just mass split, ignore the speed, say that we're comparable in speed, and ask, have you built up enough defense? And it looks like this is the part where I think I disagree with Azure, but I don't know what you replace this disagreement with, but this would be where I would start exploring the game plan, right? Is that in both games Azure has said, I have a lot of static defense, so your fiends are going to do nothing. The problem is that does stop the fiends from doing things, but the move out of these fiends is seemingly always coinciding with grabbing a 4th base. So the fiends move out. Wouldn't surprise me if we see some sentry turrets ready to go. Some Lancers. Yep, it's Lancers again. Now, here's the thing. Lancers look like you really want them, but Lancer's AoE is in a pretty short line. It's in like the distance of, it looks like about 2 fiends, 2.5 fiends, right? I'm using 1, 2, and 3. I think that's about the Lancer's max range, right? And by all accounts, it does about 14 damage, and we saw that it did against the Exo, which might have a different armor type, true, but it did 10 damage. So it seems like it's doing about 70% damage in its AoE. It might be 100% damage in its AoE, but the armor types cause it to be different. It might be a different value entirely. That's enough to get you an idea of what's going on. All of these fiends, as soon as this brute split into fiends, you want to not fight. And the reason you want to not fight is they will die eventually. Now, obviously, they're coming to your base, so you don't have a choice, right? They're in your base killing your dudes. But all of these fiends are, I believe, 60-30. Is that correct? I believe that's correct. Or are they 40-20? We're going to get a click on one of them, I'm sure. And this seems to be the answer that Azure has gone for multiple times, which is, I have static defense. This is a wall. Right, I have Bomb Overcharge and Static Defense. I don't really care about what you do, but this is the problem, right? This right here. This is what we see actually when people were trying before they moved to better tactics, better moves, right? Things of that nature. We did see people actually go for something in Little War Game like Soldier Gatling Gun, which is pretty damn close to Lancer Hedgehog. The problem with Soldier Gatling Gun, or in this case Lancer Hedgehog, is that if there are enough units to force the Gatling guns away, and I mean clear away, like you have to leave, you can't stand, save all of the units, the slower units can't run away. And the problem is that the slower units are your tanky frontline units. So this is like losing your shield on the battlefield, right? You're saving your sword and losing your shield. And the sword might allow you to kill somebody else, but the shield is what makes sure that you don't die to just any random stray hit that comes in. I'm sure if you're Azure, you're feeling a lot of like hostility towards this moment, because you will actually survive, and we do see the Shroud Stone was able to kill all of these, and in fact it turns out that killing all of the Fell Hogs has now worked against. What a crazy sentence. Killing all of the Fell Hogs and some of the Fiends from earlier is actually now working against the Vanguard player. I also don't yeah. And the problem is that every time one of these infested units die, as we all know, once the infested unit dies, it dies and you spawn a fiend, and that fiend has, that's right, they are 60-30, but they spawn with 50% of their veil, their white health if you're new. So they just 75 hit point units, and now we've gone from something like a pack of 9, I think I counted earlier, to 6, and all of the Lancers are just like emulsified bodies on the ground. They're just completely wrecked out of their minds. And yeah, why wouldn't you stream Fiends in? And another cast of the Shroud, because when all of your Fiends died, and a couple of your opponent's units died, you just got to get the cast in again. Yeah, why not? And once again, once you've lost the shield, it doesn't matter how nice the sword is or your skill with the sword, right? Especially since your opponent has the same speed that you do. Yep, we can see that actually these Lancers do have the upgrade, but again, we have seen this. The Lancer upgrade is very nice, but I think it's better in PvE. And I don't mean PvE as in go back to 3v co-op noob. I don't mean that in the slightest. What I mean is creeps aren't going to full surround you the way that these Fiends do. And once you're full surrounded, it doesn't matter if your movement speed is busted up to the speed of light. Well, I guess then it does. Because if you're attacking the units relativistically and causing like space-time fabric to warp and all of this other sciencey stuff, then like, yeah, you might actually just stop playing Secluded Grove, take a fight, and then end up on Titan's Causeway because you've caused like a rip in the Stormgate map time continuum. Yeah, but once you've lost the shield, it doesn't really matter how fancy you are with the sword if your opponent shares your skill, right? Or is he at least in competition with and alongside your skill? We're getting pizza after this game, by the way. Yep. I don't blame them. They're trying. I don't really agree with this fourth base right here. I know that this was done with the saved imp that we saw previously, but the reason I don't like this is that now your defensive area is in front of all of your defenses, so you basically have to remake the defenses over here, or you just have to say, hey man, I just want the double base anyways, then go push out. Maybe this is a plan to take this because it's a little awkward, and then take this, and notice this is why we call it the salamander, because look, blah, blah. It's more like a slug, actually. It's just a slug with a tongue. Sounds like a foul, like... Listen, not to mention too many other RTSs, but it sounds like an abomination. And now with this, the overcharge consumed on the third base. Yeah, with the overcharge consumed on the third base, the Infernals on a very heavily favored map pick. They have 4 bases to your 3, and you've lost the shield. Your sword can no longer move out because you have no way to fall back defensively. And I think Azure is running into the same difficulties that they had in Game 1. Pretty worse worse interaction between openings this game than in Game 1, but the same build in both cases, just a better map for their plan on Game 1, right? To be aggressive with the tech and then move from there. Again, we're not seeing a lot of Gaunts, right? But we are seeing a lot of Fiends. Makes sense. Fiends are about as fast as these Hedgehogs, and once we get the surround, yeah, it's just bad. It's just bad. Yeah, the Hedgehogs are treated as the most sacred, most like inner circle thing to protect. But again, it's not that you don't protect the Hedgehogs. It's just the situation is becoming impossible. The situation is already, in fact, impossible because I believe that was 6 brutes, and you can just start making these, sending them, and then forcing your opponent to prove that they care. The one saving grace is that you have denied the Infernal player their ever critical middle base, and this is, in fact, why I think that this 4th base. I talked about this before the game started, and I talked about this yesterday. Man, I nailed this shit. So, you see this 4th base? If instead of this 4th base, a Magmadon had been made, then you just attack the vision camp, steal it, and then push up from here. And now you have a 3 o'clock entrance into the double. And now you've gone from 3 bases to 5 bases. And this minor point of possible irritation, right, the center, that should be yours by right, is now definitely yours. Right? And so now, unbeknownst to you, you think you're in a great economic position. You are in a great military position. You are, like, you're splitting up things. You're just killing your opponent with mass brutes. It feels really good, right? You're just attacking the Hedgehog numbers. They're going down repeatedly. You're forcing overcharges. But you could be in a 100% winning scenario if instead of grabbing this 4th base to save the 1 imp, you had grabbed this base over here. I know your opponent had access to Hedgehogs at the time, and you cleverly were able to save the imp. But it's just not enough, I'm afraid. Now, the 1 point of joy has been completely removed. This base is going to go down, and there is no way that anything will ever come in here to defend it. And so all hopes are now over for Azure, who is unfittingly actually going to lose to the blue player TheoRy, right? Yep. Big cast there, and yeah, 3 of these are going to die, generate more fiends. There's going to be an overcharge in the natural, almost certainly. Yep, Lancers can run away, and their AoE is pretty good, but they're pretty good in a choke, not when they get surrounded, and if they go too far out of bounds, then they clip out of the map, like it's Sonic Adventure 2 speedruns at Games Done Quick, and you haven't seen awesome Games Done Quick. They've been active lately. They actually had a Brood War speed run. I know Artosis was talking about that. So I feel rude for saying this. You probably shouldn't say that. Like, it seems disrespectful to the people, to the skill, to the effort that they're putting in. Yeah, but this game is over. As soon as the Mass Fiend broke, and we saw that the defense was going to be Bob Overcharge and some static defense, as opposed to units that could efficiently deal with the Hedgehogs. Again, I think the problem with this is there is a limit to how effective each additional Hedgehog is, and I would love to know what that number is. That's something you just really need the numbers for. Like, for example, in Little Wargame, I won't say that there is a right, and if you don't make this number, you're wrong number of a unit, but I will say that some units, if you choose to stop at that number, that's a good number to stop at, and you probably shouldn't go beyond a certain number. So, for instance, for the Gatling gun, for the Gyrocraft does 12 damage, workers have 120 health. You may notice that 10 Gyrocraft shots is going to be enough to one-shot a worker, but that means 5 is enough to two-shot a worker, so 5 seems like a pretty good number, because they're a flying, fast, mobile, aerial unit with a single target attack, right? That seems pretty good. Hi, Magmadons. Magmadons are here for one purpose and one purpose only. They are here to slow or stun the mechanical Hedgehogs. If they can do that, then the Fiends encircle and win. Hell, they might not even need to do that. It's also here because, remember what I said about one Magmadon, a Magmadon? Well, a Magmadon is going to take care of the path so that you have a 3 o'clock opening to the double. Yeah, The thing is, while all of this is happening over on the right-hand side, and it looks pretty good, now the sword is getting... Okay, so this is actually a better trade, and this is probably why this game goes on for a little while longer. If you're trading your fiends with... and they're in a position where they're losing to the shield, like... You're like this surround hitting a couple of Hedgehogs. That's good because if you clean up enough offense, your opponent's defense and their stalworthiness doesn't matter. But for a little while, when there were just like 4 or 6 fiends back here, and they were hitting a Hedgehog, but these were getting the rest of the Hedgehogs and dealing damage, this is actually pretty good. You would rather that your sword get attacked than your shield. Right? As a person who's done boffer LARPing for a while, let me tell you, you would rather have pressure on your weapon than pressure on your defense. And that means a lot of things, like in boffer LARP, if your knee is out, right? If your arm is out, you're like, okay, I can figure this out. But if your leg is out, then you're like, oh shit. And similarly, if your leg is out, but if neither one of those are out, but someone has like put your shield out of place, you're like, but if someone's put your sword out of place, you're like, This is a manageable scenario. Oh my gosh, we're going to see the Lancers and the Hedgehogs threaten to do some damage. Good Lancers. The problem is, again, those 4 bases are very secure. I also think that it could have just knocked your opponent out of the game entirely, but okay. A lot of this too was because the attack of the Mass Fiends over on the so the attack of the Mass Fiends over here on the left-hand side, right, bought the overcharge and killed some of the Hedgehogs, most of the Hedgehogs and all of the Lancers, and that bought a lot of space and time. That space and time just didn't generate like mad instantaneous value. And now again, the fact that you haven't used the Magmadon to go break into this area, into the 3 o'clock position. Did I call it? Did I call it? 3 o'clock position on Secluded Grove is now giving a second opportunity. And the problem is now actually for TheoRy is that while Azure wasn't a bad scenario, Azure's scenario right now is tenable. Not really, but tenable. It looks closer than it is. So main natural 3rd, 4th, 5th base, and they're pretty hard to actually engage upon. So this middle base has gone from being the one that leads the base up to the one that is going to make base equality. And so it has to stay alive. And this is all a consequence of TheoRy not generating the Magmadon earlier, right? The Magmadon could have broken down 3 o'clock, like I've said before, and then grab those bases, and then actually this becomes quite difficult, because this base is now, the first time that the middle base went up when was going up as there were almost no units on the part of Azure. But now that Azure is stabilized enough to have a force, that force can conceivably, as long as they get to the center first, which is what we're about to click on and see, as long as they can get to the center first, and this is close enough to getting there first, by the way, they should be fine. I mean, yes, there is a flayed dragon, but you could always hunker down. And this is not enough of a force, so they have to back up. And now you feel really bad, because actually the Infernal game plan on Secluded Grove is supposed to be that you get this base. And I don't actually give... I take away from TheoRy here, I think. The problem, though, is that there's now like this really inverted dynamic where, because you have Lancer Hedgehog, you're trying to say, I'll win the straight up fight. And now you're just not fast enough to deal with the Fiends. You're kind of hoping SimCity and other tactics will deal with it. And, well, I think the fact that that was not a wall is a surprise to more than one player. Yep. As the army comes back over here, there should now be a dance back into the main. There should be a dance with these units into the main, or into the center base. Yep, and that's what we're seeing. So this is the pull out of position. It's going to be a little bit late for TheoRy here, actually. But as soon as the Fiends were down here, these units should have been moving over to the side as well, unless he was waiting to gauge the reaction of the opponent. Also, there are 3 overcharges left on this base, so while the wall will have to get made over and over and over and over, the rest of it is kind of fine. As the units tickle in, it actually looks pretty good. There's too many forces here, by the way, for TheoRy to actually deal with. I think his thinking is, if I have mass infested these, I'm just going to commit to the whole thing, full send, and even if I die, you won't be able to kill me. And any amount of time that I'm attacking you is a delay over here. There was an overcharge on the side over here, and we see that the infestation is going on here. The level 2 medtech is like uprising things over here. A lot of Fiends have died up at the top, and actually not enough Bobs have died over here on the left-hand side. Flayed Dragon is doing some work. And now, just barely, the units have lived, right? That was closer than I thought. My ability to evaluate these fights when infestation is going on is very difficult, because I actually had that as the Bobs on the left aren't going to die, and then the units that are on the bottom right-hand side are going to trade okay in the front line, but there's a second wave of Lancers, so they'll be okay. Yeah, the Flayed Dragon's really good. By the way, the design of the Flayed Dragon implies to me that there is a belief that the Infernals struggle in the late game. Just a thought. Now that the center base has been captured and the third wall has been remade, this is a 5 base v 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 base scenario, because the main is mined out. Well, actually, the main is mined out for both, so it's 5v4. And this means that... Okay, so if you're now in this scenario, things get kind of weird, because you don't have another base really to take, right? You only have one other base that kind of makes sense, which is the hook base if you're Azure. And you still have to defend that kind of wonky pain point base in the bottom, and you did stop the win condition, the auto victory condition of your opponent from getting the center. Again, I think that was more food that TheoRy left on the plate than something that Azure positively did. But it was good that Azure took advantage of it, right? No shame there. And now you have to wreck a base to expand. And then you have to ask, do 6 total bases beat basically trading out the sides? And we are also going to see what the next units are. We did see Medtech seemingly before Vulcans here. But there are some Vulcans. Yep. I want to note, actually, that Medtechs have looked just more impressive than Vulcans throughout this game and throughout the last game as well. And in fact, if you know that your opponent is leveling the Blood Moon, I think it is, is it Blood Moon? The Shroud, like the Shroud Stone ability that makes you infest things in a global area, which probably gonna get nerfed from being global if I had to guess. Ooh, and the natural has run out. That's not good. Just a speculation, not relevant to this particular bit of analysis. But if you have buildings, Gaunts don't infest things very well, and if you have medtechs that have the master training, then it's very hard for units to actually die, which means that the infestation doesn't quite do what it's supposed to anyways. Like I said, medtech's probably the unit I would look at to see if I could get some magic to happen. So this is now going to be a siege operation, and what's weird is there's actually many ways for Azure to lose this, and not many ways for TheoRy to lose this. And what I mean by that is this. You can time, so maybe there isn't something like Luminite stacking or mining, where you can see a gold value, a number that indicates how close it is. But if you're the kind of person who's in this Supercup, you probably have a feeling that your natural is about to run out. I've not played as many games of Little Wargame as these people have of StarCraft 2 and other RTSs, and I can still feel when I'm on form when a mining base is going to run out. So you probably know that your natural is running out if you're Azure, and that means that your opponent's natural has mined out, and you do have a scout making sure they don't have the hook base. So if you're TheoRy, you win this by attacking Azure's third. You win this by denying the hook base. You win this by winning the straight up fight here. You win this by not losing any of your bases, which are placed in very awkward and inopportune locations for your opponent to attack, because your opponent has to keep the center, right? Also, all those static defenses you built early on to get 3 bases, looking pretty good now. As for Azure, not very many ways to win this. You basically, I'm not going to say you have to catch a throw, right? But you have to have your opponent commit into you into a fight that you win convincingly. And you have to win convincingly enough to probably take out the hook base, right? You don't, Azure would have no way of knowing that that is actually because of early game, Azure would know that that's the 4th base. So you don't really want to attack the 3rd because it's going to deplete soon, right? That part of the game is going to end. But if you can win this fight here, push out and attack the hook base, you kind of pin all of the Infernal army. The Infernal army would love, like I said, to go to the south, go to the 3rd, delay the hook base, maybe just send like 10 fiends to force an overcharge into the natural over and over, and then just keep the bulk of the army here. Maybe trade out some units here, but not all of them. But if Azure pushes through this, and this will be very hard, but if Azure pushes through this into the right and owns the spot in front of the Shroud Stones and the meat farms that are over here with the Fell Hogs, then they can move down and contest the hook base. And since the hook base is base number 4, that is its loss or its threatening is actually going to have a big impact on Theory's ability to remain in the game. That relies on a lot of things to go wrong. And basically for Theory to not know that that's how badly things could go and we see a Shroud Stone. Wouldn't be surprised if we see even more Shroud Stones, by the way. Oh my gosh, you can use this? You can use this medtech ability on the Hedgehogs? I wonder what's tankier, the Hedgehogs or the medtechs? Just something to think about, right? Just something to think about, right? And we see some Weavers, and Weavers are actually now going to demonstrate the thing I said in the Infernal Units video, which is, or I suspect we should see, which is just, you're dancing, yoink, you just pull the unit over. And considering that holding this is a loss prevention technique on the part of Azure, yeah, a nice meat farm, by the way. Every time a Weaver does a lash and pulls a unit, it doesn't matter what that unit is. You're saying you can take this. Oh my gosh! You can take this minor loss, or you can take this minor loss, or you can commit to the fight and possibly lose the game. That is a lot of dead Hedgehogs. Oh no, not quite. Yep, it's an attack to the natural. Are these imps? Yep, these are Flame On imps. Makes sense, they're blowing up the workers in the front, and the fiends are putting pressure over on the side, and you don't have to be analyzing the game to just look at the minimap and be like, well, how's the fight in the center? It looks 50-50, but there's a lot of Bob deaths. What's that blue? Not Azure's units, man. And also, I've experienced this myself in RTS games. When you have a base that doesn't have any mining left, you tend to think, oh, I mean, there's always infrastructure there. It's not as important. And if there's no mining, there are no bobs, and that means that's ripe for the picking. Now, those do get cleaned up well enough, but that's a lot of infrastructure. That's a lot of units that are going to die. That's not as many units that are going to die. I mean, some of the Bobs that are on Ethereum are going to die. The real problem is the barracks are going down. That's 2 barracks going down. There should be a 3rd barracks going down, actually. There's hold position micro right here to make sure that they capture all of the people who are over there. The command post is going to go down, or central command. Yep, and there's Azure with the GG. Again, many ways for Theory to win from that position, busting the front, sending units over to the 3rd. He picked one I didn't consider, which is send the units over to the natural and threaten your opponent's production. And if they move, hit the front, and then they can't contest both. And the only way that Azure was actually going to win that game was pushing out to the east over at the 3 o'clock position and trying to get the hook base. And there was just too many meat farm shroud stones, good unit awareness on the part of Theory. He looked like he was playing this at halftime speed because he seemed to be in the right place all of the time. With the one exception, strategically, I don't think he could have captured the center and made the game much shorter. And I also think that he overcommitted a bit to the bit on the 3rd when he saw it was fully walled and there was a Bob overcharge. I know you have fiends and you probably want to leave, but them's the breaks, right? And so actually, I think that this game showed what you can do to come back in a scenario where you get a little bit wrecked by the Hedgehogs. I think, again, just as in the last game, once the Fiend pop happened, the big Fiend pop, we saw a lot of difficulties on the part of Azure to figure out what to do against that other than to SimCity properly. And, I mean, that does work as a purely defensive tactic, but it did lead to this scenario where the Infernal player had a base up, a base of their choosing. We already went over what the decision of that base was for their choosing and maybe how I would have picked something different, but it wasn't a bad, a bad play by Theory. I just don't think it was optimal. And then overall for Azure showed that if you could just get enough Lancers and stop hemorrhaging units, you actually have a big enough army that you can just straight up fight, but also showed that if you have a unit that can straight up fight and is immobile, you won't be able to put out the firefight such as these fiends over here. This makes me think that you're going to have to put on a lot of pressure on brutes to make sure that they're not just a fiend factory. Right, I think that actually Azure showed a number of things even in this loss. The first game is more so than the second, which is if you have Sin City, you discourage your opponent from using Gaunts because Gaunts don't infest buildings very well. They can't turn them into fiends. I did think that the Hedgehog harassment was good and the plan on game 1 was quite solid with the tower and the push. I think there was a misunderstanding of how best to deal with the micro potential and the movement speed that your opponent has with all of these fiends. I don't think Lancers are it. I think Lancers are good in a straight up fight. I think Lancer Hedgehog is good in the straight up fight, but I think that they're seeing a problem that is very similar to what happened in the early days of Rax versus Beast when Rax players were first adapting to the Wolf, which is, yes, Rax units are stronger, or in this case Vanguard units, the combination of Lancer Hedgehog is actually physically stronger, but you do realize the fiends don't have to commit to the full attack, right? Just something to think about. Just a thing to think about. We're going to go on a brief pause. I'm going to go get some food, and I'm going to get a little bit more of my drink, and then we're going to go into the next, not the next video. Oh, geez. Well, we are. We're going to go into Artosis' next video. If you liked that, go ahead and use Bang Match 2. I'll put the command in. Here, we'll just put this in. Bang Match 2, this is Azure versus TheoRy. This is the link that you can go to Artosis Casts, I believe, 2. Artosis Casts 2. And then you can watch this. You can listen to his dulcet tones. You can listen to his reactions and how he is going to definitely copy some of this game plan, especially Parting's game plan, which we will get to in a second. And then you can also, special thanks to the observers as well. So like I said, we're going to take 5. Maybe a little less than 5. A brief break, then return for, let's see. Yep. Now, this is going to be a long one when we get there. Yep, so we're going to have a brief break, then we're going to return for Mixu versus Azure. Jokes, ha 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 ha, it's going to be a pure Vanguard matchup, so obviously a Vanguard player has to win, hoo 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 hoo. Alright, enough of your jokes. I'm actually quite looking forward to what the two players come up with. Right, let's go ahead and expand this, mute this, and we're going to see you in a second. Alright. Enjoy your sanity break, everyone. Get some stretching in. Yep. Yep. Feels good. I'm going to go take a toiletries break, grab some food, and I'll be back in a bit. Don't mind me, but I am going to mute all of you in the process.